My alien boss says it's just company policy. Yet she refuses to let me go home. The dream. Job Marcus Flynn had dreamed of working off-world since he was 12, watching the cargo haulers disappear into hyperspace from the docks of Luna Station. Now, at 28, he stood in the gleaming corridors of Velcorp's premier research facility on Trion 6, still hardly believing his luck. The industrial moon's crimson sky stretched beyond reinforced viewports, dotted with the skeletal frames of mining rigs and processing plants. Technician Flynn. The voice cut through his reverie like a thermal blade through durasteel. He turned to face his new supervisor, Director HFY, a Thessari woman who towered over him by nearly a foot. Her obsidian skin seemed to absorb the corridor's blue-white lighting, and her three-fingered hands held a data tablet with mechanical precision. You will report to Laboratory 7 for system diagnostics. Marcus nodded, trying not to stare. He'd read about the Thessari. Their reputation for logic and efficiency was legendary throughout human space. What the files hadn't mentioned was how unsettling their complete stillness could be. HFY hadn't blinked once during their brief exchange, her large silver eyes fixed on him with unwavering intensity. Of course, Director. Should I expect any specific protocols for? Follow standard procedures. Efficiency is paramount. She pivoted with military precision and glided away, her footsteps silent on the metal flooring. The first 3 weeks passed in a blur of routine maintenance and system updates. Marcus found himself settling into the rhythm of industrial life on Trion 6. The work was challenging but rewarding. Velcorp's technology was decades ahead of anything he'd encountered on Earth or the inner colonies. His fellow technicians, a mix of humans and other species, were professional if not particularly friendly. The isolation didn't bother him. He'd always been more comfortable with machines than people. HFY remained an enigma. She spoke only when necessary, delivered assignments with clinical detachment, and observed his work from a distance with those unblinking silver eyes. Marcus began to wonder if all Thessari were so coldly professional, or if his supervisor simply found humans beneath her notice. Everything changed during the night shift of his 4th week. Marcus was alone in Laboratory 7, running diagnostics on the primary power coupling when the lights flickered. The hum of the ventilation system stuttered, and for a moment the familiar background noise of the facility fell silent. Emergency lighting bathed the lab in red, and somewhere in the distance, an alarm began to wail. Power grid fluctuation. In sectors 7 through 12, came the automated announcement. All personnel maintain positions until systems stabilize. Marcus moved quickly, his fingers dancing across the diagnostic interface. The coupling was overheating, a cascade failure that could take down half the facility if left unchecked. He rerouted power through the secondary channels, his training taking over as adrenaline sharpened his focus. Impressive response time. Marcus spun around to find HFY standing in the doorway, her silhouette framed by the corridor's emergency lighting. He hadn't heard her approach, typical for a Thessari, whose movements were naturally silent. Just doing my job, Director. The coupling should stabilize in another few minutes. She stepped into the lab, moving closer than she ever had before. In the red light, her obsidian features seemed less severe, more curious. Your efficiency exceeded baseline projections by 37%. Most humans would have requested assistance. Most humans haven't spent 6 years maintaining life support systems on mining platforms. Marcus tried to keep his voice steady, though something in her tone made him uneasy. Independence was a survival skill. For the first time since he'd met her, HFY's expression shifted. It was subtle, a slight tilt of her head, a barely perceptible narrowing of her eyes. If he didn't know better, he might have called it interest. Fascinating, she murmured, and something in that single word sent a chill down Marcus's spine. The lights flickered back to full power, and the alarm fell silent. The diagnostic screen showed green across all systems, crisis averted. But as Marcus turned back to face his supervisor, he found her watching him with an intensity that made his skin crawl. Good work, Technician Flynn. she said, her voice returning to its usual clinical tone. Report to Laboratory 7 tomorrow at 800 hours for extended system monitoring. As she glided away, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had just changed. The power failure had lasted less than 10 minutes, but he suspected its effects would linger much longer. Part 2. Overtime Observations. The extended monitoring assignments began the next day. Marcus found himself working longer hours, always under HFY's direct supervision. At first, he attributed it to standard protocol. After a power failure, any competent supervisor would want to ensure system stability. But as days stretched into weeks, the pattern became impossible to ignore. Laboratory 7 requires overnight monitoring, HFY announced during the morning briefing. Technician Flynn will handle the late shift. Marcus glanced around the room at his colleagues: Roberts, the gruff engineer from Mars Colony; Zara, a Centauri tech specialist; even the new hire, Davidson, who'd arrived just last week. None of them seemed surprised by the assignment, but Marcus noticed they avoided meeting his eyes. Director, Roberts spoke up, I could take the overnight rotation. I've got more experience with the older systems. Technician Flynn's efficiency ratings are optimal for this assignment. HFY's tone brooked no argument. He will continue the monitoring protocol. After the briefing, Marcus lingered, hoping to speak with his colleagues. But they dispersed quickly, leaving him alone with a growing sense of unease. He caught Davidson by the elevator. Hey, quick question. How often do you guys pull overnight? Shifts? Davidson looked uncomfortable. Not often, maybe once a month, rotating schedule. He paused, then added quietly. But I heard you've been doing them for 2 weeks straight. The elevator arrived and Davidson stepped inside without another word. As the doors closed, Marcus caught a glimpse of his reflection in the polished metal. He looked tired, confused, and increasingly paranoid. That night, Marcus settled into Laboratory 7 for another long shift. The facility took on a different character after hours. Corridors that bustled with activity during the day became eerily quiet, lit only by emergency strips that cast long shadows on the walls. The constant hum of machinery seemed louder in the silence, punctuated by the occasional groan of metal expanding and contracting with temperature changes. HFY arrived at precisely 2100 hours, as she had every night for the past 2 weeks. She positioned herself at the observation station, her silver eyes fixed on Marcus as he worked. The attention was becoming unbearable. Director, Marcus said, not looking up from his diagnostic screen. I've been wondering about something. Speak. The power coupling that failed 3 weeks ago. I ran a full analysis. The failure wasn't random. Someone had been accessing the system parameters, making small adjustments over time. The kind of changes that would eventually cause exactly the kind of cascade failure we experienced. The silence stretched so long that Marcus finally looked up. HFY stood motionless, her expression unreadable. When she finally spoke, her voice was carefully neutral. Your point, Technician Flynn? I'm wondering why someone would want to cause a controlled power failure, and I'm wondering why I'm the only one pulling these extended shifts. Another pause. Then, unexpectedly, HFY moved closer to his workstation. Marcus caught a whiff of something like ozone and copper, the natural scent of Thesari biochemistry. You ask many questions, she observed. Is this typical human behavior? The question caught Marcus off guard. What do you mean? Curiosity, the compulsion to seek explanations for patterns you perceive as irregular. On Thessos, such behavior would be considered inefficient unless it served a specific purpose. Marcus found himself studying her face, looking for clues in those alien features. And what purpose do you think my questions serve? That, HFY said, is what I am attempting to determine. She moved to the secondary console, her movements fluid and precise. But Marcus noticed something new, a slight hesitation before she touched the controls as if she were thinking about something other than the task at hand. Tell me about Earth, she said suddenly. What about it? Your customs, your emotional responses to various stimuli. How do humans form attachments? The question was so unexpected that Marcus nearly dropped his diagnostic probe. I'm sorry, what? It is a simple inquiry. Human social behavior is complex. Unlike the Thesari interaction protocols, your species appears to operate on multiple levels simultaneously: logical, emotional, instinctual. I wish to understand the mechanisms. Marcus stared at her, trying to process the conversation. His supervisor, cold, efficient director HFY, was asking him about human emotions in the middle of a night shift. The absurdity of it almost made him laugh. Why are you asking me this? Research purposes, she replied, but something in her tone suggested the answer wasn't entirely honest. Continue your work, Technician Flynn. We have many more hours to fill. As Marcus returned to his diagnostics, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was missing something important. The extended shifts, the personal questions, the way HFY watched him work, it all felt deliberate, purposeful. But what purpose could a Thesari supervisor have for keeping one human technician under such close observation? Outside the laboratory windows, Trion 6's crimson moon hung low in the alien sky, and Marcus began to wonder if his dream job was becoming something else entirely. Digital discoveries. The breakthrough came during Marcus's 5th consecutive week of overnight shifts. He'd been running routine maintenance on the laboratory's data servers when he noticed an anomaly in the file structure, a partition that didn't appear in the standard directory but was consuming significant storage space. His curiosity piqued, he began to investigate. The partition was encrypted, but Marcus had always been good with security protocols. Years of troubleshooting systems across the outer colonies had taught him to find backdoors and diagnostic overrides that manufacturers never intended for field use. It took him 3 hours, but eventually the encryption yielded. What he found made his blood run cold. The hidden partition contained hundreds of files, video recordings, biometric data, psychological profiles, and detailed behavioral analyses. All of them focused on him. Marcus watched in horrified fascination as security footage showed him working, eating in the cafeteria, even sleeping in his quarters. The timestamp showed the recordings began the day after the power failure. But it was the text files that truly disturbed him. Clinical observations written in Thesari script, automatically translated by the system. Subject demonstrates elevated stress responses when isolated from peer group. Cortisol levels spike during prolonged observation periods, suggesting awareness of surveillance despite lack of direct confirmation. Interesting adaptive behavior noted. Subject attempts to establish verbal communication patterns with observer, possibly seeking emotional connection. This behavior contradicts the Thesari assumptions about human workplace interaction. Recommendation: increase frequency of personal inquiries to test subject's willingness to share emotional data. Previous sessions suggest subject may be developing attachment-based responses to extended contact. Marcus scrolled through dozens of similar entries, each one more invasive than the last. The files revealed a comprehensive study of human behavior, but they also revealed something else: confusion in the researcher's notes. The clinical observations began to change tone after the 2nd week. Unexpected development. Observer experiencing difficulty maintaining objective stance. Subject's emotional responses are affecting observer's own behavioral patterns. Note: Thesari are not supposed to experience curiosity about individual subjects beyond research parameters. Consulting with home colony inadvisable. Study. Must continue to gather sufficient data. Personal log. I do not understand why I feel protective when subject shows signs of distress. This was not part of the original study design. The most recent entry was dated just 2 days ago. Subject asked direct questions about extended work assignments, lied in response, claimed research purposes, when truthful answer would be, I do not wish him to leave. This deviation from Thesari honesty protocols is deeply troubling. Study may be compromising observer's psychological stability. Marcus sat back in his chair, his hands shaking. He was the subject of an alien behavioral study, conducted without his knowledge or consent. But more disturbing was the suggestion that the study was affecting his observer, HFY, in ways she didn't understand or expect. Technician Flynn. The voice behind him nearly made him jump out of his skin. HFY stood in the doorway, her silver eyes fixed on the screen displaying her private files. For a long moment, neither of them moved. "I can explain," Marcus began, but she held up a hand to silence him. "Unnecessary. You have accessed classified research data without authorization." Her voice was perfectly calm, perfectly controlled. "Standard protocol requires immediate termination and memory adjustment." Marcus felt his mouth go dry. Memory adjustment? Selective neural modification to remove classified information from long-term storage. Standard procedure for security. Breaches. She moved toward the workstation, her movements as fluid and precise as always. However, there is a complication. What kind of complication? HFY stopped just within arm's reach, close enough that Marcus could see the subtle patterns in her obsidian skin. "The study you have discovered is, unofficial. The Sari Command does not know of its existence. If I report your breach, they will investigate the source of the classified data and find out about your illegal research." "Correct." She paused, and for the first time since he'd known her, HFY seemed uncertain. "This creates a logical paradox. I cannot report your breach without exposing my own violations, yet I cannot allow you to leave with knowledge of classified Thessari behavioral research." Marcus stared at her, trying to process the implications. "So what happens now?" "I am unsure." The admission seemed to cost her something. "Thessari do not experience uncertainty. We calculate, we analyze, we decide. But you—" She gestured at the screen full of research data. "You have created variables I cannot quantify." "What kind of variables?" HFY moved to the window, gazing out at Tryon 6's industrial landscape. In the red moonlight, her profile looked almost vulnerable. "The study was designed to analyze human emotional responses under controlled conditions, but the process has affected me in ways I did not anticipate." "How?" She turned back to face him, and Marcus was startled to see something almost like confusion in her silver eyes. "I find myself reluctant to conclude the research. When I observe distress indicators in your biometric readings, I experience what I believe humans call concern. When you attempt to leave at the end of your shifts, I create reasons to extend your presence. You've been keeping me here on purpose." "Yes." The admission was barely audible. "This behavior is not logical. It serves no research purpose. Yet I continue to prioritize your proximity over operational efficiency." Marcus felt a strange mix of anger and something else. Sympathy? The alien woman standing before him had been studying him like a lab rat, but she'd also been struggling with emotions her species wasn't equipped to understand. "So what happens now?" he asked again. HFY looked at the research files still, displayed on the screen, then back at Marcus. "I do not know," she said quietly. "For the first time in my existence, I genuinely do not know." Dangerous revelations. The conversation that followed stretched deep into the night cycle. Marcus found himself in the surreal position of counseling his alien supervisor through what appeared to be her species' equivalent of an emotional breakdown. "On Thessos, we are taught that emotion is inefficiency," HFY explained, pacing the length of the laboratory. "Logic, analysis, calculation. These are the tools of advancement. What you call feelings are classified as biological malfunctions, to be corrected or suppressed." Marcus watched her movement patterns, noting how they'd changed from the rigid precision he'd grown accustomed to. Now there was something almost human in her restlessness. "But you're experiencing emotions anyway, apparently." She stopped at the far end of the lab, her back to him. The study was designed to analyze how humans form emotional attachments in workplace environments. Thessari researchers believed such attachments represented a significant weakness in human psychology, one that could be exploited for tactical advantage. The casual mention of exploitation sent a chill through Marcus. "This is military research. Was, Kethva corrected. The study was commissioned by Thesari Strategic Command 18 months ago. I volunteered because I believed I could maintain proper objectivity. She turned to face him, and Marcus saw something like shame in her alien features. I was wrong. What changed? You did. The words seemed to surprise her as much as they surprised Marcus. Your response to the controlled crisis, the power, failure, was not what the behavioral models predicted. You should have sought help, deferred to authority, demonstrated the dependency patterns that Thesari analysts expected from human subjects. But I didn't. No. You solved the problem independently, efficiently, with no regard for your own safety or the possibility of failure. And when I observed your competence, she paused, struggling with the words, I experienced what I now understand to be pride, not in my research, but in your achievement. Marcus felt his anger beginning to fade, replaced by a growing understanding of the impossible position they were both in. That's when the study parameters changed. Yes. I began creating opportunities for extended observation, telling myself it was for research purposes. But the real motivation was, she gestured helplessly. I enjoyed your presence, your questions, your problem-solving approaches, even your obvious discomfort with my supervision. It was fascinating in a way that had nothing to do with strategic intelligence. So you kept me here night after night. Yes. Kethva moved to the central workstation, her fingers trailing across the control surface. Each evening I would tell myself it was the last observation session. Each morning, I would find new justifications to continue. The research data became secondary to the simple pleasure of interaction. Marcus found himself studying her profile, looking for signs of deception or manipulation, but everything about her posture suggested vulnerability, confusion, even fear. What happens when your superiors find out? Thesari who develop emotional instabilities are typically recalled for psychological reconditioning. The process is comprehensive. When it is complete, I would retain my technical knowledge but lose whatever it is that makes me. Me. The implications hit Marcus like a physical blow. They'll wipe your personality. Essentially, yes. The Kethva who has been studying you, who has been experiencing these incomprehensible feelings, would cease to exist. In her place would be a properly functional Thesari researcher, free from emotional contamination. Marcus stood up, pacing to the window. Outside, the industrial moon continued its endless cycle, mining ships arriving and departing in regular intervals. The routine normalcy of it contrasted sharply with the impossible situation he found himself in. There has to be another option, he said finally. I have calculated 17 different scenarios, Kethva replied. 12 result in my reconditioning, 3 result in your memory adjustment, and 2 result in both of us being terminated as security risks. And the other scenarios? Statistically improbable. She joined him at the window, standing close enough that he could feel the warmth radiating from her alien physiology. They would require actions that violate both Thesari protocols and Veil Corp employment contracts. Marcus turned to face her. Such as? Kethva met his gaze, and for the first time since he'd known her, her silver eyes seemed to hold depths he'd never noticed before. Abandoning the research, destroying the data, and finding a way to ensure neither of us can be forced to reveal what has occurred. That sounds like running away. Yes, it does. She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was barely above a whisper. I find myself willing to consider statistically improbable options. Marcus felt something shift in his chest, a recognition that their situation had moved far beyond the boundaries of a simple workplace misunderstanding. The alien woman standing beside him had risked everything to satisfy an emotion her species didn't even acknowledge existed. And now they were both trapped by the consequences of her curiosity. Kethva, he said carefully, what exactly are you asking me? She turned to face him fully, and in the red light of Tryon 6's moon, her alien features seemed almost familiar. I am asking if you would consider helping me do something completely illogical, dangerous, and likely to result in both of us becoming fugitives from Thesari law. Marcus thought about his dream job, his carefully planned career, the life he'd built for himself among the stars. Then he looked at the alien woman who had been studying him, manipulating him, and ultimately caring for him in the only way she knew how. "Tell me your plan," he said. "Escape velocity." The plan was audacious in its simplicity. Kethva had been monitoring all communications to and from Tryon 6 as part of her research protocols. She knew that a Thesari inspection team was scheduled to arrive in 48 hours to review the facility's operational status, a routine visit that would become anything but routine once they discovered the unauthorized behavioral study. "The inspection will include data audits," Kethva explained as they worked through the night to prepare. "Even with the files encrypted, Thesari security protocols will eventually uncover the research. We have perhaps 36 hours before my superiors realize what I have done." Marcus was busy at the secondary workstation, his fingers flying across the keyboard as he implemented their escape plan. "And you're sure this will work?" "The probability of success is approximately 23%, Kethva replied with characteristic Thesari precision. "However, the probability of survival if we remain is 0%. They had decided to steal a ship. Not just any ship, a Vial Corp long-range courier that was currently docked at the facility's primary landing bay. Marcus had discovered it during his research into the facility's systems, and Kethva's access codes would get them past security. The ship was fast, well-equipped, and capable of reaching the neutral zone before Thesari authorities could intercept them. "Data purge is complete," Marcus announced. "Every trace of your research has been wiped from the facility's systems. I've also uploaded a few surprises into the security network. Should keep them busy for a while after we leave." Kethva nodded, then moved to the laboratory's communication console. "I must send a message to my superiors. If they believe I was killed in an industrial accident, they will not pursue us immediately." "Will they believe it?" "Thesari do not typically lie, so deception is not expected. The facility has experienced several accidents in the past year. Mining operations are inherently dangerous. One more casualty will not seem unusual." As she composed the message, Marcus found himself watching her work. The alien woman who had seemed so coldly efficient just weeks ago now moved with purpose that seemed almost human. The emotional awakening she'd experienced had changed more than just her research priorities. It had changed her fundamental nature. "Message sent," she announced. "We now have approximately 6 hours before the shift change reveals our absence." They made their way through the facility's corridors, moving with careful purpose. Kethva's access codes opened doors that would have been impossible for Marcus to breach alone, while his knowledge of the facility's systems helped them avoid security patrols and monitoring stations. They made an effective team, their skills complementing each other in ways that neither had expected. The courier ship was exactly where the manifests indicated, a sleek vessel built for speed and efficiency. As they boarded, Marcus felt a pang of regret for the life he was leaving behind. His quarters, his colleagues, his carefully planned career trajectory, all of it was about to become history. "Regrets?" Kethva asked, seemingly reading his thoughts as she initiated the pre-flight sequence. "Some," Marcus admitted. "This wasn't exactly how I planned to spend my off-world assignment. Nor did I expect my research to conclude with grand theft and voluntary exile." She paused in her preparations, looking at him with those silver eyes that had watched him so intently for weeks. "Are you certain you wish to proceed? You could remain here, claim ignorance of my actions. Your memory adjustment would remove any compromising information, and your life would continue as planned." Marcus considered the offer. It would be the logical choice. Stay safe, stay legal, stay predictable. But as he looked at the alien woman who had risked everything to understand emotions her species considered a weakness, he realized his choice had been made weeks ago. "I'm certain," he said. "Besides, I'm curious to see what happens next." Something that might have been a smile crossed Kethva's features. "Curiosity," she said. I am beginning to understand why humans consider it a virtue rather than a flaw. The ship lifted off smoothly, rising through Tryon 6's thin atmosphere toward the star-filled void. As they cleared the moon's gravity well, Marcus activated the long-range sensors and plotted a course for the neutral zone. Behind them, the industrial facilities grew smaller, and ahead lay the unknown territory of interstellar space. So what happens now? Marcus asked as they engaged the hyperdrive. Kethva settled into the co-pilot seat, her alien features calm but alert. Now we discover whether emotions are truly a weakness or if Thesari Command has been wrong about human nature all along. And us? What happens to us? She turned to look at him, and in her silver eyes, Marcus saw something he'd never expected to find in an alien face. Hope. I believe, she said carefully, that we are about to conduct a new kind of research. One that neither Thesari nor human scientists have attempted before. What kind of research? The study of what happens when two very different species choose to trust each other completely. As the ship jumped to hyperspace, leaving Tryon 6 and its industrial complexes behind, Marcus realized that his dream job had become something entirely different, and perhaps something better. The alien woman beside him was no longer his supervisor or his captor. She was his partner in an impossible venture, his companion in exile, and possibly something more that neither of their species had words to describe. In the swirling blue-white tunnel of hyperspace, Marcus Flynn and Kethva began their real research, not into the weaknesses of human emotion, but into the unexpected strength that could emerge when two individuals chose connection over safety, curiosity over caution, and each other over the comfortable predictability of their former lives. The study was just beginning. The end.